would you, even knowing all this, go ahead and trade for a guy for whom his regimen would absolutely catch up with mid-30s, right? I mean, like at some point there has to be a little bit of slowing of the in between games frolic, right? I mean, wouldn't that be a concern for any team that might take on Harden here?
Yeah, especially because he's in a strange sort of tweener position with his contract. Now, we all remember a couple of years ago when Kawhi Leonard demanded a trade. He had 1 year left on his contract. The Spurs had next to no leverage, and the trade package that they got, I mean, they got a quality player in DeMar DeRozan, but it wasn't the same, trade that you could have made if you were going to have him for a few years. So the Rockets are not taking pennies on the dollar for him because he's got multiple years. Having said that, it's 2 years. So if you're going to pay the going rate for an MVP level player, which is probably all the good young players you've got on your roster, maybe your best player, depending on how the trade works, and potentially 2 or 3 first-round draft picks, if you're trading, you're mortgaging your future, can you do that with a guy with 2 years left on his contract? Ideally, you'd like for him to extend his contract so that you have a window with him. So he's in that sort of zone. But you look at him and you look at the way he's treated his team, and now you have pause. He does have a player option in his contract. You could sort of split the difference and ask him to pick up that player option. But, a contract extension for him would be paying him $50 million a year when he's in his mid-30s. That's a hard pill to accept right now. And so the Rockets have a high burden that they wanted to get him in a trade, which understandably he's been in the top 3 or 4 of the MVP race for the last half decade. And then you have teams that are going to be worried about that. I think it's a very complicated trade to pull off. I think they'll get it done.
You do?
But I think it's going to be a hard mix.
You do? You think so when does something like this get done?
That's the question. We don't know. I mean, I think, one of the things that's happened in the last few months, Rich, is that the 2021 free agent class, which at one time looked pretty damn promising, has essentially vaporized. Giannis will not be a part of it. There was I'm not saying that I thought LeBron or Anthony Davis were going to move, but there was a possibility that those guys were going to be free agents. They ended up both signing long. Paul George was going to potentially be available. He extended his contract. And even sort of the second-level star players, Drew Holiday is likely to extend in Milwaukee now that Giannis has. Rudy Gobert, who's an attractive player, an extension candidate. The only guy out there of an elite level, super elite level free agent is going to be Kawhi. He's not eligible for an extension, so he's going to be a free agent. Having said that, there's no indication he's leaving L.A. So if you're a team that was pinning itself on trying to get a star player in 2021, you reassess here and say, well, the star player we may be able to get is James Harden. So, and I do think there's 2 or 3 teams out there who could get into that game. Whether or not those teams are going to be on James Harden's list, and whether or not James Harden, if he got traded to a place off of his list, would show up and play like Kawhi Leonard showed up and played, that's an open question for sure.
All right. So, Brian Windhorst, who are those teams? Are any of the? Let's start with this. Are any of the teams that are on Harden's wish list a possibility? Do you think?
I think the Miami Heat are an interesting possibility. Pat Riley has long been a guy who's believed in get me the highest level talent, and then our system will make it work. The classic example of that was Shaquille O'Neal when he had kind of washed out his welcome in L.A., and they got him into a position where he was executing at a very high level. And they have the young players. The problem with that is they only have 1 draft pick they're currently allowed to trade, which is 2027. So it's hard for them to give the draft capital. But, a young player like Tyler Hero being a centerpiece of a trade package might be interesting. You have the New York Knicks, who have, a bunch of young players, all of their draft picks available to them. And if they want to improve rapidly, that's a guy that they could maybe get. And then you have some sort of for farther shot teams, which would be maybe a team like the Cleveland Cavaliers, who has young players, has extra draft picks. I don't think that's where James Harden would want to be, but that's the type of team that could maybe make an offer that could get Houston interested. And you could go farther down the list. But I do think that there will be teams that will make offers. When will they make them? We have to see how things play out.
Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.